Hey everyone, MrRadiss here, and today I'm going to update you on the dungeons, more specifically the player's role in the dungeons in the Elder Scrolls Online. This is very recent, fairly recent actually, a couple days old, and it's a bit lengthy, so there's a lot of stuff in here, so we won't focus on anything too specific, we'll just go straight through it. Alright, so the player roles talks about DPS, tanking, and healing. DPS is damage per second, which is pretty much doing as much damage as you can on whatever you're fighting. Tanking is keeping the enemy's attention, and they're the ones with the most health and can absorb the most damage. And the healers, of course, heal up both the DPS and the tanks and the healers at times. Now, it says here, so it's a bit more flexible in the Elder Scrolls Online. It says, for example, let's say your group's healer goes down during a boss battle. In many games, it will be impossible to recover at this point. However, you are prepared for such a situation. You swapped your two-handed sword out right in the middle of combat for a restoration staff, which activates your second hotbar, where you have cleverly slotted some healing abilities. Now you can keep the party going. Now this is quite interesting. This is going to be a lot more open for the Elder Scrolls Online in comparison to, say, World of Warcraft. In World of Warcraft, you select a role and that's your role. You can't switch from tank to DPS mid-fight. But in the Elder Scrolls Online, apparently you can go from being a DPS to being a healer, or DPS to tank, which is quite interesting. It's got some stuff for DPS in here, so monsters will attack you. Don't panic, and don't expect your tank to handle every enemy alone. You have a great toolbox to mitigate damage. You can interrupt, block, and dodge while dealing damage. This focusing on one enemy at a time is helpful. So it's running through a lot of the staples of the DPS role, but it's introducing a few new ones, like being able to absorb a bit more damage than you can in other MMOs. It's also about AoE abilities. They're good, but they can be dangerous because they can draw a lot of enemies at you at once. And it says here, be careful with your attacks, avoid attacking monsters in the back lines of a pack, and then more details in the next section. Alright, for healing, make sure your party has at least one player that can heal the group. The more players that bring healing abilities, the less the less need there is for a dedicated healer, which is a healer that is sticking to the healing role rather than switching mid-fight. Coordinate with your group. You might even find that with the right abilities, each player can manage his or her own health, which is introducing a bit more individuality, a bit more care focused on the player rather than the healer and the tanks, because in World of Warcraft, Dungeons and Raiding, a lot of emphasis is placed on the healers and tanks to maintain the group and keep it running, but in this setup it looks like the DPS will have an equal role in that sense. Okay, you'll take damage too. Remember that you can interrupt, block, and dodge. And these are abilities generally not found in MMOs for healing. It's generally just about healing. And dodging attacks maybe, but never interrupting or blocking. This is quite new. Also, crowd control is a bit new. Alright, tanking. You won't need to get every enemy's attention. Every player can take a few hits from standard attacks, and they have lots of ways to take care of themselves. Many healing abilities affect an area, so your healer, if you only have one, should be able to take care of several party members. So it's taking a bit of the pressure off tanks, letting them know that your party can be attacked a few times and survive. It's just taking a bit of pressure off. In a fight with a large group of enemies, a tank's ability to control the fight is critical. Stun the healers, interrupt the spellcasters. You're the best party member for the job because your stuns and interrupts will tend to get those enemies to attack you back. It's about crowd control, it's about threat control, which is just the level where, like, if you're at the top of the threat chart, the enemy will attack you first, and if you die, the second will be attacked by the enemy. You do need to stay engaged with tougher monsters like bosses, so you need to keep fighting them. Pretty standard. Monster behaviors. Enemies in any room in a dungeon are well aware of each other. When one is attacked, the others are alerted and prepared to fight back. We call this pack mentality. A common aspect of WoW, depending on what you're fighting. By default, a pack of monsters spreads out and each enemy chooses a target. Player actions can change their targets to some extent. For example, taunt abilities force an enemy to attack you for a fixed duration. This is actually quite interesting, because in other MMOs, the first person to be an aggro of one would get all of them, but it appears here it's a bit more smart. There's a bit more AI in the enemies. It's quite interesting. They don't all attack at once. Some immediately join the fight, but others are prepared to be in the backline before moving in. And this is what we were talking about before for the DPS. If you get too close to backline enemies, or if you attack them, they'll join the battle. So you want to have some kind of control on what you're attacking. So if you just go gung-ho in and you don't know really what you're doing and you attack everything, you're gonna have a lot harder of a time than if you carefully plan what you're going to attack and you mark it out. In general, enemies target the closest player that is attacking them, which is what I said before in World of Warcraft. If they aren't being attacked, different enemy types choose different targets differently. For example, a ranged enemy is more likely to target a ranged player than a melee enemy is. And that's quite interesting. So it looks like they're taking a lot more care into the role of the enemies and the role of their their patterns of attack. And so quite interesting. I'll just read this last bit. Dungeons represent some of the toughest challenges in the Elder Scrolls Online, and they add yet another adventure you can choose to experience as you explore Tamriel. We hope this peek behind the portcullis, helped give you some insight about dungeon design, and we're excited to see how you choose to tackle these dangerous delves in your own groups. Make sure you share this with your prospective party members so they'll be prepared too. Okay, so that was pretty long. But yeah, pretty interesting nonetheless. So thanks for watching, guys. If you liked, please like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.